Chapter 647. On the 18th of September, there would be 2 battles in the Nine-Dragon Lake. One would be between Yi Chen and Du Gujiue, a monster against a monster, while the other would be between Xiao Chuha and Lu Xiaoyu, one of the top 5 young warriors against one of the top 5 young warriors. No matter which battle it would be equally eye-catching. Therefore, even before September arrived, some people had already started their journey. They would rather arrive early than be left behind, especially those who did not live in the Sky Martial region. Inside the Nine-Dragon Mountain, Nine-Dragon Lake, just like a year ago, before the 18th of September arrived, the place was already packed with people. People kept on joining in. "Brother He, you are late." "It is not that I am late. It is you who is early." "Haha, don't try to find excuses. Drink 3 cups as punishment first." The lakeside was extremely noisy, and there were countless similar voices. On the second day, the Nine-Dragon Lake was even more crowded. "Look, Shangguan Fei and Helian Wuhua are here." One of them beat the Blackwater Master, who was ranked 63rd on the ranking, with 4 attacks, and the other beat the Fire Cloud Master, who was ranked 69th with 3 attacks. They are not friendly. Only a dragon can cross the river. This year, they will definitely be able to make it into the ranking. Everyone sighed. 1 year ago, there were only 6 warriors under the age of 40 in the first ranking, which were the top 5 young warriors in Yi Chen. But this year, there might be more than 10 warriors under the age of 40. It might even be 15, which would double the number of warriors in the ranking. "Brother Shangguan, how have you been?" Helian Wuhua was wearing a long black robe, with a long blade on his waist. His legs were extremely long, looking like he could jump out at any moment to kill his enemies. On top of a small hill not far from him stood a young man in yellow. He had a golden band on his head, with thick eyebrows and huge arms and legs. His weapon was a short spear that was as thick as a bowl. It was forked, looking like a poisonous snake's tongue, looking extremely aggressive and evil. "Brother Helian, long time no see." Shangguan Fei glanced at Helian Wuhua with a bit of fear. The 2 of them had battled a lot before, but there had never been a clear winner. In order to do so, they would have to go through a tough battle. "Hehe, you are not here to watch this time, right?" Helian Wuhua said casually. Shangguan Fei said right away, "Of course not." "Me too." A sharp light flashed through Helian Wuhua's eyes. On the 3rd day, Situ Hao had arrived. In terms of fame, Situ Hao was much more famous than Helian Wuhua and Shangguan Fei. After all, the 2 of them had only beaten warriors who were ranked in the 60s, while Situ Hao had beaten Tu Yuan from the Breaking Sword Master, who was ranked 33rd, and he had only thrown out 1 sword attack. Although Helian Wuhua and Shangguan Fei did not come with good intentions, they did not plan to challenge Situ Hao. They knew very well how powerful he was, and without using their defensive sword spell, neither of them had the confidence to win. He looked extremely cold. He had picked a mountain of Yave, of the Chun, and of. And Chun of the Situ Hao of the Chun of. "Yi Chen, my defensive sword spell has already reached the 2nd level. This time, I will make sure you lose without any hesitation." Shoo, shoo, shoo. More and more warriors arrived. After today and tomorrow, it would be the 18th of September. Everyone looked up and could see human shadows flying over from the horizon. Among these people, a lot of them were young martial geniuses. Some of them came in groups, while others came alone. All of them had an excited light shining in their eyes. For some of the Sea of Souls realm warriors, perhaps they were just here to watch the show, since it would be hard for them to learn anything from it. But as young martial geniuses, their comprehensive ability was naturally not something that some of the Sea of Souls realm warriors could compare with. The Sky Martial region is indeed a sacred place for martial geniuses. Almost none of them are weaker than us. On top of a small hill, a couple of young men and women stood side by side. The one who spoke was a young man with a long sword on his waist. "This is good as well. Before, we were always the center of attention. Even in the southern regions, no one would look down on us. But now that we are here, we can finally experience the hardships and joy of climbing up step by step. Didn't Yi Chen rise up like this?" These people were indeed Li Daoxian, Yan Qihua, and Bingling from the South Ridra region. Besides Morong Qingqing and Yi Chun, only these three had reached the Sea of Soul's realm. Of course, Sikong Sheng had not been heard from for a long time, so no one knew what realm he had reached. Tua Baku, Gu Yuyan, and the others who were about the same age as Yi Chun had not been able to make a breakthrough yet, since they were too young after all. On the fourth day, Yi Chun arrived. Since Morong Qingqing was still in closed-door training, Yi Chun came alone. Yi Chun is here. I wonder if he has improved a lot. Right now it is not like a year ago. There are too many young warriors chasing after him. If he is not careful, he will be surpassed. Yeah, although Yi Chun's position is quite eye-catching, it is also quite awkward. In front of him are the top 5 young warriors, and behind him are a bunch of top young warriors. Yi Chun's arrival had attracted a lot of attention. They all looked at Yi Chun, hoping to find something from his qi. Yin Qihua studied Yi Chun as a strange feeling flashed through his heart. Back in the South Ridra region, their fame was even bigger than Yi Chun's. Wherever they went, they would be the center of attention. Right now, they had come to the Sky Martial region's 9-Dragon Mountain, but no one paid any attention to them. They were like nameless warriors. However, Yi Chun's arrival had stirred up a huge wave. In the span of 8 years, their identities had been completely changed. Oh, Yi Chun is here. Do you want to play a few rounds with him? Shang Guanfei and Helian Wuhua saw Yi Chun. A strange light flashed through their eyes. Although Yi Chun was ranked 48 on the Master-level Warrior ranking, which was higher than the Blackwater Martial School and the Fire Cloud Martial School that they had beaten, the difference between 48 and 60 was not that big. Moreover, they were able to beat the Blackwater Martial School and the Fire Cloud Martial School within 3 to 4 attacks, which meant that they would be at least ranked 20 to 30 back then. Therefore, even if Yi Chun had improved a lot, they did not think that they would lose to Yi Chun. Most importantly, as long as they did not lose, it would be the same as winning. On the other hand, Yi Chun could not lose unless he was facing the top 5 young warriors. If he lost, then he would not be able to keep his position. If he lost, then he would not be able to keep his position. Let me go first. Shang Guanfei did not plan to let go of this chance, so he flew out first. Helian Wuhua shook his head. He had wanted to challenge Yi Chun as well. Putting away his flying puppet, Yi Chun landed lightly on a huge mountain near the 9-Dragon Lake. He saw Li Daoxian and the other two, so he nodded to greet them. Yi Chun, tomorrow is the battle between you and Dugaju. Why don't we spar a bit? Shang Guanfei stood in the middle of the lake, his voice spreading out with the help of his Zhen Yuan. HM? Shang Guanfei wants to challenge Yi Chun? These two did not come with good intentions after all. They even targeted Yi Chun. But to be honest, Yi Chun might not be able to win. After all, Shang Guanfei had beaten the Blackwater Martial School, who was ranked 63, with only 4 attacks. It is a bit hard to say, but Yi Chun would not have made no progress, would he? Everyone did not know that Yi Chun had beaten Situ Hao and beaten back one of the top 5 young warriors, Xia Hozuan. So they all felt a bit uneasy and worried for Yi Chun. You want to challenge me? Yi Chun was a bit surprised. To be honest, with Shang Guanfei's battle record, not to mention now, even half a year ago, Yi Chun could beat him within a second. The two were not even on the same level. Knowing that he wanted to challenge him, Yi Chun did not expect it at all. Thinking about it, Yi Chun laughed. Indeed, in the past year, his few battles had been very secretive, and not many people knew about it. So it was normal for people not to know about his power. Oh well, I will just shut those people up then. What? You do not dare? Shang Guanfei saw Yi Chun's expression, and thought that he was not prepared for it, so he let out a breath of relief. He thought that he might actually win. You do it. Putting away his surprised expression, Yi Chun said lightly. Hearing him, Shang Guanfei was furious. He had been waiting in the middle of the 9-Dragon Lake for his opponent to come, but he did not expect that the latter would not come at all. All right. Taking a deep breath, Shang Guanfei tried his best to suppress his anger. As long as he won, he would see if the latter still had the right to be so arrogant. Boom! The lake water exploded as Shang Guanfei attacked toward Yi Chun at an extreme speed. In the middle of it, he held the short spear in both of his hands, and drew a half circle in the air before throwing it out. Snake and Dragon combined attack. Shangguan Fei used his killer move right off the bat. His short spear, which was as thick as the rim of a bowl, emitted a bright light. Two huge and ferocious figures rushed out of the light. One was a venomous python, and the other was a dragon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. The python and the dragon were entangled together, forming a spiral as they rushed out. Hiss! Oa! The snake and the dragon roared together, their auras reaching into the sky. Such a powerful killing attack. The snake contains a soft power, while the dragon contains a hard power. One soft and one hard. Normal people would not be able to handle it at all. Everyone held their breaths as they stared at Yi Chen, wanting to see how he was going to deal with it. Too weak. Yi Chen shook his head and took out his gold sword, waving it out casually. Pop! With Yi Chen as the center, a huge circle of ripples spread out and exploded, covering the giant serpent and the long dragon inside. Although the giant serpent and the dragon were creatures of the water and could easily overturn rivers and seas, this gold ripple wasn't just a simple water profound. It was a killing move that combined the metal and water profound. It contained both the endless water profound and the indestructible metal profound. Moreover, compared to half a year ago, the gold ripples had become even stronger. Crack! Without the slightest pause, the moment the serpent and the dragon came into contact with the golden ripples, they crumbled inch by inch and dissipated into pure energy. What was even more frightening was that the golden ripples spread out in waves, forcibly combining the power of the serpent and the dragon together, and spreading towards Shangguan Fei. Not good. Shangguan Fei's face turned pale. He crossed his spear together, trying his best to defend. Boom! It was like a normal person running into a tsunami. Shangguan Fei puked out a mouthful of blood, as his whole body was blown backward without any power to fight back. Chapter 648. What? He could not even handle one attack. A lot of people had their mouths wide open, shocked beyond words. Although they thought that Yi Chen had a higher chance of winning, they would never have thought that Shangguan Fei could not even handle one attack from Yi Chen. Most of them thought that even if Yi Chen were to win, it would not be easy, and would take dozens or even hundreds of attacks. After all, Shangguan Fei's power was right there. He had beaten the Blackwater Master, who was ranked 63rd in the Master-level warrior ranking, with only 4 attacks. Impressive! Everyone was completely convinced by Yi Chen. Just when they were wondering if Yi Chen could keep his position, Yi Chen had given them a definite answer. How could he improve this fast? The Ice Sword Master had also arrived. She had already prepared herself for Yi Chen to surpass her, since she was not a young person after all, and she had almost used up all of her potential. Her improvement in 1 year would not be able to compete with the young geniuses. Plus, Yi Chen was not a normal young martial genius, but a monster-level martial genius. But she would never have thought that Yi Chen would improve this fast. 1 year was not a long time for Sea of Souls realm warriors, and it would be great if they could make some progress. But 1 year for Yi Chen was equivalent to years for others or even decades. Sword art genius, the Ice Sword Master mumbled to herself. Li Daoxian and the other two were just as shocked. They had not seen Yi Chen for a year or two, and they had all been busy training. Since they were martial geniuses from the South Ridra region, they did not have much contact with the Sky Martial region. They had always thought that the gap between master-level Sea of Souls realm warriors would not be that big. But now, it seemed like the gap between master-level Sea of Souls realm warriors was 10 times bigger than they had imagined. Normal master-level Sea of Souls realm warriors would not be able to handle one attack from Yi Chen, and someone as powerful as him would not be able to handle one attack from Yi Chen. They could not imagine how the gap between master-level Sea of Souls realm warriors could be this big. Actually, it was not their fault for underestimating the gap between master-level Sea of Souls realm warriors. Only by standing at the top would one be able to see further. Once they reached Yi Chen's realm, they would know that the gap between the cultivation was not that big, but the gap between martial arts and profound sense would be limitless. For normal master-level warriors, once they reached late Sea of Souls realm, They would be able to master a couple of low-rank profound sense martial arts, and one mid-rank profound sense martial art. Although Yi Chen was not as powerful as them in terms of cultivation, his sword intent power was equivalent to peak level rank 5. If he combined his sword intent with his cultivation, Yi Chen would not be at a disadvantage when facing peak level late Sea of Souls Realm Master level warriors with peak level rank 4 willpower. He might even be able to win. Excluding cultivation and willpower, Yi Chen's profound sense martial arts were even more impressive. Not to mention his Thunder Devour and Gold Fury. Just his gold pattern alone would be twice as powerful as normal mid-rank profound sense martial arts. It would be strange if Shang Guanfei could handle one attack from Yi Chen. Boom! Shang Guanfei crashed heavily into a small mountain beside the lake. His whole body sunk into the rock wall, creating a human-shaped hole. That intense sword chi spread out everywhere, cutting the mountain into pieces. Puking out another mouthful of blood, Shang Guanfei fainted immediately. The young martial geniuses who were close to him hurried to get him out and move him to a nearby building to rest. Hellion Wuhua saw Shang Guanfei like this, so he looked at Yi Chen with a horrified expression. He was glad that Shang Guanfei had challenged Yi Chen first. Otherwise, he would be the one in trouble. Right now, not to mention challenging Yi Chen, he did not even have the courage to face Yi Chen. Yi Chen glanced at Hellion Wuhua. Before Shang Guanfei challenged him, he had been whispering with him, probably discussing who should challenge him first. Feeling Yi Chen's intimidating gaze, Hellion Wuhua hurried to turn his head away, avoiding Yi Chen's gaze. His palms were covered in sweat. Is Yi Chen getting more and more powerful? Today was the last day before the battle, and a lot of people had arrived. Yan Fengfeng, Hai Wuya, and the rest of the young warriors had all arrived. Yan Fengfeng said, I cannot win against him right now. 1 year ago, Yan Fengfeng thought that she could exchange hundreds of attacks with Yi Chen, and if she went back to her phoenix form, she would be able to beat him. But she was just like the godly shark princess. She did not like to be too high profile in front of humans. Only when something unavoidable happened would she use all of her power. A lot of people knew that Yan Fengfeng had been hiding her power, so they did not dare to mess with her too much. Hai Wuya said, his power right now should be at the first level, right? The young martial geniuses were divided into a couple of levels. The first level would be the top 5 young warriors. The second level would actually be people like Lin Tian. The third level would be people like Hai Wuya. And the fourth level would be some of the normal powerful young martial geniuses. As for the even more normal young martial geniuses, they would not even be in the top level. Although Shang Guanfei and Hellion Wuhua were a lot more powerful than Lin Tian, they were only at the top of the second level. On the other hand, Situ Hao, Bai Minghui, and the rest of them were already close to the first level, or even already at the first level, including Yan Fengfeng. Alright. Beating you like this should be even more interesting. It was right then that a sharp voice spread out over the entire Nine-Dragon Lake. Situ Hao. Everyone who was watching the battle looked over and saw Situ Hao flying out, his feet lightly touching the surface of the lake. There was a sword on his waist and another one on his back. Yi Chen's expression did not change. It seems like your defensive sword spell has improved again. Let's do it. Without even guessing, Yi Chen knew that since his opponent dared to stand out, he must have a lot of confidence. Most likely, he was going to use his defensive sword spell as his ace attack. Judging from Yi Chen's tone, it seems like the two have battled before? I guess so. I wonder who won. It is hard to say. Situ Hao's defensive sword spell is too powerful. It is extremely fast, and its attacking power is very high as well. Facing this kind of sword spell, most of the martial arts would not be able to perform in time. Tu Yuan from the Breaking Sword Martial School was a master-level sword artist. A sword artist's attacking speed was always fast, and so was their reflexes. For Situ Hao to be able to beat his opponent with one sword attack, it was not hard to imagine how powerful his defensive sword spell was. Therefore, besides a small portion of people who thought that Yi Chen would win for sure, most of them were just watching. Among them, there was even a small portion who thought that Situ Hao was going to win. The defensive sword spell was a long-lost sword spell, And it was indeed a powerful weapon. "Don't worry, I will use it." Situ Hao was not stupid enough to use his defensive sword spell to attack Yi Chen from a distance. If the distance was too far, his opponent would definitely have time to prepare. It would be like attacking his opponent's advantage with his own weakness, which was not a smart move. Of course, if it were Shangguan Fei or Helian Wuhua, Situ Hao would not be so scared. With his defensive sword spell, he would still be able to win easily. Different opponents meant different strategies. 3 Ultimate Sword. His body floated into the air as Situ Hao threw out 3 sword attacks in a row towards Yi Chen, who was on the mountain peak. Break! Yi Chen wanted to test out Situ Hao's defensive sword spell, but he knew that the latter would not dare to use it if he did not get close to him. He did not stay on the mountain peak, but flew towards the 3-sword chi. On the way, his body suddenly sped up. That sharp sword light was like a crescent moon, cutting the 3-sword chi in half. The remaining power was still there, as it continued to attack towards Situ Hao. Arrogant. A sneer flashed past his face as he took a deep breath. He held the long sword in his right hand, and waved it hundreds of times in the air. Each time he threw out a sword attack, the sword chi would be extremely slow, as if it was frozen in the air, waiting for the other sword chi to arrive. Within a blink of an eye, hundreds of sword chi interweaved together. Under the push of the last huge sword chi, it was like a huge net, covering Yi Chen who was coming at him. Swoosh! 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 Skynet Sword. Besides the defensive sword spell, Situ Hao's most powerful sword attack was under the cover of the Skynet Sword art. Pulling one part of it would affect the whole thing. As long as one sword chi was broken, it would be surrounded by other sword chi. It would be like catching fish in a huge net, with no way to escape. Not a bad sword attack. How could Yi Chen not see through the secret of this attack? If normal fast sword attacks had a wide attacking range, then the Skynet Sword art was definitely not as simple as that. People who could not see through this attack would think that they would be able to pass through as long as they could break the sword net. However, once they broke the net, it would cause the balance of the sword net to lose, which would lead to the other sword chi's attacks. It would be like hundreds of sword chi attacking from all directions. However, it was a pity that Yi Chen's gold pattern was the bane of this attack. Raising his gold sword high up, Yi Chen threw out a sword attack. Pop! The gold pattern spread out in a circular shape. Yi Chen was surrounded by the attack from all directions, and he was like the center of the pattern, the source of the wave. Pap! The sword net and the gold pattern clashed together, causing a huge explosion. The dense sword chi could not even get close to Yi Chen. Once it got close, it would be blown away by the waves of transparent gold pattern. If the sword net was a huge net, then the gold pattern would be a huge whale. A normal net would not be able to catch a whale that was the king of the ocean. After breaking through 2 of Situ Hao's attacks in a row, Yi Chen was only 100 meters away from his opponent. Defensive sword spell. 100 meters was Situ Hao's attacking limit. He did not hesitate anymore, as he performed a sword spell with his right hand. The long sword on his back automatically took out of its scabbard, bringing with it a sharp sword light as it attacked towards Yi Chen, who was not far away. Shoo! The long sword's flying speed was extremely fast. It had already surpassed the normal speed. It was like the sword had just been taken out of its scabbard when it arrived, right next to Yi Chen. Ting! Yi Chen's expression did not change as he blocked out the long sword with his sword, bringing up a huge amount of sparks. Kill! Situ Hao's expression was cold as he performed a sword spell with his right hand. The long sword that had been thrown out suddenly started dancing in the air, attacking towards Yi Chen from another direction. Ting! 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 The flying sword's speed had been pushed to its peak. Even if it was blocked out by Yi Chen, it could still attack again without any time to stop. No wonder he was so confident. He had reached the level where he could move the sword with his mind. The defensive sword spell was a long-lost sword spell, so it would be impossible to say that it was not powerful. The user of this spell only needed to move his mind, and the flying sword would be able to kill his enemies in the air. Since the flying sword was not an intelligent creature, it did not have any chi and blood. Therefore, It would not have to face the awkward situation of having to use up all of its power, which made it extremely hard to deal with. Most importantly, every time the flying sword was blocked by Yi Chun, it would try its best to fly back and wait for the chance to attack again. Therefore, every time they clashed, it would only be a fake attack. As long as Yi Chun made a mistake, the flying sword would attack right in and turn from a fake attack into a killing attack. I do not believe that you would be able to maintain that flawless attack for a long time. Even if you have no flaws, I will still make sure that you do. Situhao backed out a little. Once the defensive sword spell was performed, it would be necessary to increase the distance. Is that all you have? Yi Chen's voice was heard. Hearing him, Situhao's expression changed as he said sarcastically, "You are just trying to be mysterious. Even if you have a powerful sword attack, so what? As long as it is not fast enough, you will not be able to do anything to me." The biggest use of the defensive sword spell was to stop some of the powerful martial arts that were not fast enough from being performed. Chapter 649. Indeed, I need to be faster. Then let's be faster. All of a sudden, Yi Chen's sword speed increased. The whole area was filled with a gentle sword wind, which was formless and traceless. The flying sword was affected by the sword wind, causing sparks to appear on its body. Each wave of sword wind was actually an attack. With a dang sound, Yi Chen's sword speed had surpassed the flying sword's attacking speed. It suddenly landed on the flying sword's weak spot and blew it away. Right then, the spiritual sword had already reached a whole new realm, which was not something that could be compared with half a year ago. The flying sword was connected with Situhao's mind, so when it was attacked, Situhao's face turned pale, and a trace of fear appeared on his face. After blowing away the flying sword with one sword attack, Yi Chen's body did not move. He waved his right arm down, and the gold sword seemed to disappear into the surreal space. The gentle sword wind suddenly turned fierce as it traveled through the air, turning from illusion to reality. Chin. Situhao's protective Zhenyuan layer was shattered, and sparks appeared on his armor. His whole body looked like it had been struck by lightning, with blood flowing out from all of his orifices. The spiritual sword seemed to be very light, but it did not mean that its power was light as well. The power of that sword attack was extremely reserved, but its destructive power was shocking. Even with the defensive armor, a part of the condensed sword power still managed to get into Situhao's body. The sword power's destructive power made Situhao unable to hold it anymore. He puked out a mouthful of blood that contained a small amount of sword qi. His face turned pale gold, and his aura weakened. The defensive sword spell has been ruined in your hands. The first was Zhenyuan, the second was profound, the third was sword intent, and the fourth was soul power. The Zhenyuan would ensure the basic attacking power of the flying sword, while the profound would increase the attacking power. The sword intent would be just like the profound, which would also increase the attacking power. Meanwhile, the soul power would be the most important part. The more powerful the soul power, the faster the flying sword would be, and the better the control would be. Then when it came to a powerful collision, it would be able to handle it. For example, if it was Yi Chun who was controlling the flying sword just now, it would not have affected his control, because the flying sword was sent flying by a heavy blow. Of course, if the one controlling the flying sword was Yi Chun, then the flying sword would be terrifying. It must be known that Yi Chun's soul force was 5 times that of an ordinary person. Although the speed of the flying sword could not be increased by 5 times, it was not a problem to increase it by 2 times. The flying sword's speed had been doubled. What kind of a concept was that? Even Yi Chun himself would not be able to block it. All he could do was defend with all his strength and look for a chance to fight back. However, in the process of fighting back, he might be killed by the flying sword. After all, the flying sword was already a powerful killing attack in Situhao's hand, and in Yi Chen's hand, its attacking power would be horribly powerful. It's actually faster than my flying sword. After coming back to his senses, Situhao's face was full of shock. However, when he heard Yi Chun say that the defensive sword spell had been ruined in his hands, his face turned pale again. Yi Chun smiled. The defensive sword spell has a high requirement for the soul power. Your soul power is just normal, and you do not have much of a talent. In your hands, it could indeed increase your power, but it would be very limited, and the degree of improvement would not be that big. Wait until you learn a more powerful, profound martial art. Then the defensive sword spell would not be your only ace attack. Plus, you can also see that the advantage would be less and less. The soul power talent was not just Yi Chen. There were a few people who also had the same soul power. Of course, they would not be as crazy as Yi Chen. In fact, as long as one had a high comprehension ability, he or she would usually have a high soul power, much higher than normal people. Of course, it did not exclude some people with normal soul power, but high comprehension ability. So what? Situ Hao knew that what Yi Chen had said was the truth. The defensive sword spell had a very high requirement for the soul power, but the growth of the soul power was way too hard. It would only increase when one reached a higher realm, but not a small one. As long as he did not reach the life and death realm, the value of the defensive sword spell would decrease day by day. Once he reached the life and death realm, although the defensive sword spell would increase again, the life and death realm was basically the top realm of the true spirit continent. As time went on, its value would decrease as well. Let's make a deal. I will use enough money to exchange for your defensive sword spell. What do you think? Yi Chen and Situ Hao did not have a huge grudge against each other. The intense battle inside the tower was just a normal thing. In front of treasures, no one would give up. Situ Hao sneered. With a thought, the flying sword in the distance flew over automatically. Semi-extreme rank defensive armor. I will have the chance to get it one day. Semi-extreme rank attacking weapons, I am not lacking in them. Some spirit plants and medicines are nothing to me. Besides that, what else can you give me? Do you really think that you can make me exchange for the defensive sword spell with you with just a few words? I do not have any prized artifacts. As for spiritual herbs, I believe you will not be interested in ordinary spiritual herbs. However, I can see that within the profoundness that you are comprehending, the profoundness of what takes up a large part of it. How about this? I will trade my spiritual sword for your imperial sword technique and 4 dragon blood grasses. Yi Chen decided that as long as it did not cross his bottom line, he would get the defensive sword spell. As for robbing, he did not even think about it. Right now, the whole world knew that Situ Hao had gotten the defensive sword spell. Even if he had a copy in his storage ring, he would not dare to use it even if he got it, since he did not plan to fight against the king warrior behind Situ Hao. It would not be a wise move. 4 dragon blood plants. Situ Hao was shocked. The dragon blood plant was a spirit plant that could increase one's physical strength. 1 dragon blood plant could increase his power by at least tens of thousands of pounds, which would increase his power by a lot during close combat. With 4 of them, it would be even more significant. It would be more than enough to turn him into a body-training warrior. Taking a deep breath, Situ Hao's mind started to move a little bit. He said with a low voice, "The spiritual sword you are talking about, is it that sword spell just now?" Indeed. Yi Chen nodded. The spiritual sword spell contains the word profound. What other profound does it contain? Situ Hao did not think about the fast profound at all. He thought that it was some other factor that had caused the sword's speed to increase, since all the profound in the world were connected. Once they were combined, a lot of the effects would be unpredictable. Fast profound. Yi Chen did not hide it at all. His pupils shrunk as Situ Hao's heart started to beat faster. As a sword artist, there was no one who did not want their sword speed to increase. And the fast profound was the purest profound that could increase the sword speed. It was also the easiest to combine with the other profounds, since most of the profounds actually contained a slight bit of the fast profound, or the slow profound. Give me another 3 dragon blood plants, and I will agree. Although Situ Hao was not on good terms with Yi Chen, under the situation where the benefits were big enough, it was just a small misunderstanding. He had already experienced the power of the spiritual sword spell, which was even faster than the defensive sword spell. Of course, he did not think that he would be able to reach Yi Chen's level. But as long as he could reach 80% of it, it would be enough for him to increase his battling power, without the defensive sword spell, which would not be any weaker than the defensive sword spell. Most importantly, he could extract the fast profound from the spiritual sword spell. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to learn the fast profound by himself. There were many things that could not be obtained just because one wanted it, especially the fast profound, which was a very rare one. Without a doubt, learning someone else's profound would have a great chance of learning the profound in that area. As for how far he could go, it would be his own problem. Plus, exchanging the defensive sword spell would only mean having one more user. He could still use it himself, so there would be no loss at all. Yichen shook his head. I do not have that many dragon blood plants. I will give you one more. 2. Situhao said without hesitation. Alright, deal. Yichen did not hesitate anymore. He had only used one dragon blood plant before, so there were still 7 left. If he gave him 6, he would be able to keep one for himself. Alright. You have to promise me that you will not give away the defensive sword spell. Situhao was afraid that the whole world would have the defensive sword spell. If that was the case, then he would not have the advantage anymore. Don't worry. Even if you plan to give it away, I will not. If it were not for the defensive sword spell, Yichen would not have used the spiritual sword spell and 6 dragon blood plants to exchange for it. He was just lucky that he had found a dragon cave with Yen Fengfeng, and the rest in the savage ruin ancient place. If he wanted to get more dragon blood plants in the future, he would not be so lucky. Here, this is the manual for the defensive sword spell. The defensive sword spell did not contain any profound meaning, so it did not need to be stored in a jade scroll. It was just a manual. Situhao took out the manual and threw it over to Yichen. He was not afraid that Yichen would go back on his words. Yichen would naturally not go back on his words. After taking over the manual, he roughly flipped through it before nodding and putting it into his storage ring. He then took out a jade scroll and 6 dragon blood plants. The jade scroll could be bought on the market, and its full name was the Memory Jade Scroll. The owner of the jade scroll would be able to put his mind into it and record the image of him performing profound sense martial arts. Throwing the jade scroll and the plants back to him, Yichen said, You check it. No need. Situhao put away the jade scroll and the plants, turned around and flew out, sitting on top of a small mountain peak. Smiling lightly, Yichen also went back to his own mountain peak. Since Yichen and Situhao did not make a big deal, everyone only knew that the two were trading things, but no one knew what they were trading. The defensive sword spell is in my hands. Yichen looked happy. With the defensive sword spell, his soul power would not only be reflected in his comprehensive ability and soul eye, but also in his attacking power. Otherwise, having 5 times more soul power than normal people would be such a waste, and he would not be able to use it to its fullest. Just like Yichen, Situhao was in a good mood as well. The unhappiness of losing to Yichen had disappeared completely. The dragon blood plant could turn him into a body training warrior immediately, which would increase his survivability drastically. The jade scroll that contained the spiritual sword would give him a huge chance to learn the fast profound. With the fast profound, he would be able to infuse it into the profound sense martial arts he created in the future, increasing its speed and attacking power. By the afternoon, 2 of the top 5 young warriors had arrived, by Wuxia and Xiaochuha. Soon Bai Minghui arrived as well. The arrival of the first 2 had caused quite a commotion, and Bai Minghui's arrival was no less shocking than the first 2. Right now, most of the people thought that Bai Minghui had already reached the level of the top 5 young warriors. That horrifying Sky Bank second movement had scared a lot of people. Even Situhao was quite scared of Bai Minghui, since he did not have the confidence to beat his spear speed. Haha. Bai Minghui laughed out loud as he looked at Yichen with an obvious gaze. His Sky Bank second movement had been perfected after battling with Lin Chaonan, and it was even more powerful than before. This time, he would not only beat Yichen, but also some of the top 5 young warriors. Chapter 650. Bai Minghui's gaze was too direct, and most of the people had noticed that he was looking at Yichen. There was no friendliness in that gaze, only battle intent and hostility. Why does it seem like Bai Minghui and Yi Chen have some conflict as well? Strange. Situ Hao and Yi Chen have conflicts, and so do Bai Minghui and Yi Chen. When did Yi Chen fight with them? Plus, I have a feeling that they have all suffered from Yi Chen before. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to be so hostile toward Yi Chen. I have the same feeling as well. One Situ Hao was not that big of a deal, but now there was Bai Minghui. Everyone had started to understand how powerful Yi Chen was. He had managed to make two of the most powerful warriors suffer, without anyone knowing. This kind of power was not something normal people could have. Yi Chen could sense Bai Minghui's battle intent, so he smiled lightly and sat on the mountain without getting up. He had realized that Xiao Chuha had actually gotten the battle intent for Bai Minghui. Obviously, after Bai Minghui had beaten Lin Chaonan, it had affected Xiao Chuha's status. Yi Chen was the first one to realize that Xiao Chuha had the battle intent for Bai Minghui, and soon, Bai Wuxia had noticed it as well. Later on, Xiao Chuha's battle intent exploded out all of a sudden. With him as the center, the air seemed to have stopped moving, as that iron blood aura attacked toward Bai Minghui. Xiao Chuha, you want to challenge me? Bai Minghui took back his gaze from Yi Chen and squinted his eyes, staring at Xiao Chuha. Xiao Chuha walked out step by step and said lightly, even if I do not come out to challenge you, you will challenge us in the future. So, I might as well take care of it now. How could he not realize Bai Minghui's ambition? This kind of ambition could only be possessed by people who had increased their power drastically. Xiao Chuha had had it before as well, but he was very lucky to have beaten Shen Qianlang, one of the top 3 master-level blade artists, which had helped him accumulate a lot of power. Hehe, you are right. This time, I have come to the 9-Dragon Mountain to beat a lot of people. Otherwise, it would be a waste of a great opportunity. Pausing for a second, Bai Minghui continued to say, you guys have been the top 5 young warriors for too long. It is time for you to take a break. Let me be the first one. Being the first one to reach the top would mean a lot. In the future, people would say that Bai Minghui was the first one to break the rule of the top 5 young warriors. Looks like you're very confident, but I like to kill that kind of confidence. Xiao Chuha's battling style was very calm, but it should not be forgotten that he was a blade artist after all. The aggressiveness of a blade artist was carved into his bones, but it did not mean that he would be calm as well. Flying into the middle of the lake, Bai Minghui took out the long spear on his back and pointed it at Xiao Chuha. Among the top 3 master-level blade artists, I have already beaten Lin Chaonan. You are next. Are you ready? Hiss. Bai Minghui's attitude had shocked a lot of people. It had been a long time since they had seen someone challenge the top 5 young warriors. It is indeed the Sky Martial region. It is so intense. Li Daoxian and the other 2 had never seen such an intense battle before. The top 5 young warriors were well known to them, but there were still people who dared to challenge them in the Sky Martial region. Thinking about it, they could not help but admire Yi Chen even more. In such an intense place, Yi Chen was still able to survive like a fish in the water. How horrifying was that? He is so bright no matter where he is. Bing Ling sighed, her face full of admiration. When they first arrived in the Sky Martial region, they were like normal people who had just come out to see the world. But right then, Yi Chen's fame had already spread out. He was able to compete with all the top martial geniuses, and even someone as powerful as Bai Minghui seemed to have lost to Yi Chen before. I will start as a normal person then. Yan Qihua tightened his fists, his fighting spirit high. Shoo! Tapping his feet on the ground lightly, Xiao Chuha arrived in the middle of the lake, right in front of Bai Minghui. Beat me. Then, let me see what you have got. Xiao Chuha was not arrogant enough to not take out his blade, since his opponent was not a chicken or a dog. If he did not take out his blade, it would only make him lose the upper hand. Therefore, once he arrived, he took out his long blade. The blade was shining with a white light that seemed like flowing water. All right, take this. The lake water under his feet exploded all of a sudden, as Bai Minghui's body shot out like an angry dragon, his spear intent extremely sharp. Silver Dragon 7 attack. Right from the beginning, Bai Minghui wanted to test the waters. When the power gap was not that big, throwing out an ace attack would be very dangerous. Either he would be able to beat his opponent within a second, or he would be dodged by his opponent, who would then use his ace attack to beat him within a second. Although he was very confident in his Sky Bank second movement, his opponent was still one of the top 5 young warriors, so he could not underestimate him. There were 7 variations in the Silver Dragon 7 attack. As he performed it in his hand, his long spear seemed to have turned into a silver flood dragon, slashing out aggressively. Dang! 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 As one of the top 5 young warriors, Xiao Chuha would naturally not be beaten by the Silver Dragon 7 attack. His body did not move at all as he threw out blade after blade attack. If it were performed by other people, it would look very normal. However, in Xiao Chuha's hands, those normal blade attacks were able to block out the aggressive Silver Dragon 7 attack. After blocking out the last attack, Xiao Chuha suddenly attacked back. His long blade carried an aura that seemed to be able to split the ocean as he threw out a blade attack. Swoosh! The 9-dragon lake could not handle this kind of powerful blade pressure, so it was split into 2. Come on! Dragon Transformation Spear Spell. Bai Minghui did not back out, but went forward instead. His long spear shook once, turning into a massive silver dragon that roared into the sky. It shook its head and tail, attacking toward the blade light aggressively. Boom! The blade light and the massive silver dragon clashed together, and the center of the lake was almost flipped over. A huge amount of lake water shot up into the sky, forming a 100-meter thick water column. Ocean separation. Xiao Chuha cut through the water column with one blade attack, and that white blade light extended out rapidly. It had increased by hundreds of times within a second, and a bright white light shone out. This is indeed not easy to take on. Bai Minghui was a bit surprised. He had always heard that Xiao Chuha's battling style was calm and steady, but now, he realized that it was because he was preparing for an explosive attack. It was like the calm ocean. It was quiet most of the time, but once it exploded, even ghosts and gods would be shocked. Dragon Transformation Spear Spell. Dragon Power. Last time when he was battling with Yi Chen, his dragon power had not been completed yet, so he only had defensive attacks, not attacking ones. The dragon coiling up was also to accumulate power. Boom! Xiao Chuha's blade light landed on that massive silver dragon, which had been wounded badly. It roared into the sky as its body shot into the sky, blowing away that blade light. This Bai Minghui is so powerful. Before, when some of the young warriors challenged Xiao Chuha, they would all be defeated within a couple of attacks. But now, it has already been dozens of attacks, and Bai Minghui is still not at a disadvantage. Seeing that Bai Minghui had blown away that blade light, a lot of people started to discuss. They were all very shocked, since it was their first time seeing someone who was not one of the top 5 young warriors battling against Xiao Chuha. You have improved quite a bit. This dragon power made Yi Chen's eyes light up. Sky Bank. After blowing away Xiao Chuha's blade light, Bai Minghui's eyes shone with a bright light as he stabbed out his spear. Most of the people could not even see the spear's trajectory. They only felt that the distance between the two seemed to have shortened in that second. You think that you can beat me with this spear? Xiao Chuha was unbelievably powerful. Without thinking, he threw out a blade attack right at the center of that invisible spear light, cutting it in half. Then how about this attack? Bai Minghui yelled with a low voice as his long spear shook 5 times in the air. 5 twisting silver light beams shot out. It looked very slow, but it was actually because it was so fast that it caused a visual contrast. All of a sudden, the splashes on the surface of the lake seemed to have frozen in time. Xiao Chuha's expression changed drastically. The power of that spear attack was out of his expectation. Although he had heard about the power of the second movement, he had never seen it with his own eyes. That bone-deep sense of danger made Xiao Chuha's eyes turn blood red. He tried to focus his power to the point that everything around him was automatically ignored by him. There were only those 5 silver light beams in his eyes. Ting! 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 No one could describe how fast Xiao Chuha's blade speed was. Each blade attack he threw out was extremely decisive. Normally, when warriors trained on the ocean, they would not try to maintain their blade speed for a long time. But when a huge wave came, They would have to push their blade speed to its peak within a second. Otherwise, it would not be enough to split the ocean waves open. And Xiao Chuha's blade speed was 10 times faster than the one used to split the ocean waves open. In other words, Xiao Chuha's average blade speed was not the top of the line, at least not as fast as Yi Chen's sword. But within a second his blade speed was extremely horrifying. But the second movement of the sky bank was not that easy to break through. 4 of the 5 silver light beams had been cut in half, and the remaining one landed on Xiao Chuha's left shoulder, blowing him away. A huge amount of blood poured out of the corner of his mouth, dyeing the lake red. Ocean-splitting 3-blade. Just when everyone thought that Xiao Chuha was about to lose, he forcefully stopped himself from backing out. Both of his feet landed heavily on the surface of the lake, bringing up a huge wave. Using the momentum of the wave, he threw out 3 blade attacks in a row. The 3 blade attacks stacked on top of each other, bringing up a huge gale and an undercurrent. The color of the sky suddenly darkened, giving people the feeling that they were in the middle of an ocean where a storm was about to break out, making them feel like they were in the middle of an ocean. Not good. Bai Minghui did not expect Xiao Chuha's counterattack to be this aggressive and sudden. He yelled as he performed his dragon aura again. Crack! The transformed silver dragon had only managed to block out 2 blade lights before the 3rd blade light cut off its head and blew Bai Minghui away. You want to take away the title of the top 5 young warriors? It is still too early. Xiao Chuha stood on top of the waves coldly, his eyes red. In his eyes, it did not matter if it was Bai Minghui or Yi Chen. They were just people with a bit of power, who had gotten a bit too much confidence. Right now they wanted to take the top and take them down. It would just be a joke. The top 5 young warriors had been accepted by everyone through countless battles. Chapter 651. Right then, Xiao Chuha's aura was way too aggressive. His whole body was emitting an aura that made people's hearts skip a beat. That aura was like an army charging out, and even ghosts and gods would have to back out. I did not expect Xiao Chuha to be this powerful after being angered. He is completely different from before. Bai Minghui is indeed powerful as well. He managed to wound Xiao Chuha first. I wonder if he still has the power to battle after this. Everyone was shocked by Xiao Chuha's aura, and they started to discuss quietly. That blade attack that Xiao Chuha had thrown out was unbelievably powerful, and the remaining power had been pressing on Bai Minghui the whole time, bringing his body to shoot out like crazy. It tore open a few miles-long gully on the surface of the lake. When the last bit of power was about to run out, the remaining blade chi continued to attack on Bai Minghui's defensive armor. It seemed like it would not stop until the armor was broken. Bai Minghui had not stopped puking out blood at all. Seeing that the remaining blade chi was still so powerful, he yelled and shook his body. That rich Zhen Yuan shattered the blade chi, and the remaining wave spread out in a spherical shape. One could see with naked eyes that there was a huge dent in the lake's surface. Wah! After doing all that, Bai Minghui puked out another mouthful of blood. The spot that had been hit by the blade chi had gone completely numb, losing all connection with the rest of his body. Xiao Chuha won. Yi Chen, who was sitting on top of the mountain, shook his head. Bai Minghui did not have the power to battle anymore. Xiao Chuha's ocean-splitting 3-blade had the power to break the ocean, and the blade power was extremely condensed. Even with the defensive armor, it had already cut through some of the meridians in Bai Minghui's chest. Top 5 young warriors. None of them are easy to deal with. Besides the godly shark princess, who he did not know much about, Yi Chen had always thought that Xiao Chuha would be the weakest one among the top 5 young warriors. But now, it seemed like even if Xiao Chuha was not as powerful as Bai Wuxia, he would definitely not be weaker than Xia Hozuan. The battle between him and Lu Xiaoyu might be a tough one. Taking a deep breath, Bai Minghui's pupils shrunk as he stared at Xiao Chuha. His opponent's power was beyond his imagination. To be honest, he had never thought of Xiao Chuha as a threat. He was more afraid of Bai Wuxia and Xia Hozuan, since one of them was extremely well-rounded and flawless, while the other was extremely powerful in both offense and defense. Besides these two, Bai Minghui was not even afraid of Lu Xiaoyu, since Yi Chen was also a sword artist. He would beat the two sooner or later. However, the reality had slapped him hard in the face. Xiao Chuha, who he had been treating the least, had exploded with a battling power that he had never seen before. Although his Sky Bank second movement was extremely powerful, he had not expected that Xiao Chuha would be able to cut through 4 of the silver light beams, and only be hit on the shoulder by the last one. Obviously, one silver light beam would only cause some internal injuries to Xiao Chuha, and it would not even be a serious wound. After all, the top 5 young warriors' defense would not be this weak. It would take more than 2 silver light beams to make them lose their battling power completely. Damn, I was so close. Blue veins popped out on Bai Minghui's forehead. If he could go back in time, he would definitely not underestimate Xiao Chuha. He would use his power that was way beyond his limit to fight with him, and only use the second movement when he was absolutely sure. He was sure that if he had another chance, Xiao Chuha would not be able to cut through 4 of those silver light beams at once. It would already be impressive if he could cut through 3 of them. Unfortunately, there was no such thing as a medicine for regret. Yi Chen did not know what Bai Minghui was thinking, and even if he did, he would only shake his head. The reason why Xiao Chuha was able to beat Bai Minghui was because of his real power, which was something that could not be faked. Therefore, even if they were to fight again, Bai Minghui would still lose. My biggest mistake was underestimating you, Bai Minghui said. Xiao Chuha said lightly, "It is not that you underestimated me, but you overestimated yourself. I think you are not the only one who overestimated yourself." In his opinion, Bai Minghui, Situ Hao, and Yi Chen had all overestimated themselves. Alright, I have lost this time. I have nothing else to say. In front of this many people, no matter how thick Bai Minghui's skin was, he could only admit his defeat. As he spoke, his toes touched the surface of the lake, and his body flew into the air, landing on a huge tree right next to the 9-dragon lake. After swallowing a pellet, he sat down with his legs crossed. In the middle of the lake, Xiao Chuha glanced at Yi Chen before turning around and flying back to his seat. Bai Minghui lost. The top 5 young warriors are indeed the top 5 young warriors. I am afraid that will not change in the next year. Yi Chen and Bai Minghui's power is still a bit lacking after all. It was not until Bai Minghui admitted it himself that everyone knew the result of the battle. I wonder what kind of level Duga Ju has reached right now. Someone said suddenly, "Tomorrow is the day of the battle. We will know by then." On top of a small hill, Li Daoxian, Yan Qihua, and the other 2 had been watching the battle. Yan Qihua had never seen a powerful blade artist like Xiao Chuha before. Compared to him, those blade artists from the Fire Spirit Palace were like babies who had not learned how to walk yet, and he himself was only learning how to walk. The huge gap had made his blade artist heart even more determined. One day, he would beat a powerful blade artist like this and stand on top of all the other blade artists. Li Daoxian was waiting for Lu Xiaoyu's arrival. The fact that Xiao Chuha had lost to Lu Xiaoyu was known by a lot of people. Therefore, he really wanted to know how powerful Lu Xiaoyu's sword art was, and how it would compare with Yi Chen's. I really hope these 2 can have a battle. This thought suddenly flashed through Li Daoxuan's mind. He then forced a laugh, thinking that it would not be possible. Yi Chen's opponent was Duga Ju, and if it were Lu Xiaoyu, it would still be a bit of a stretch, since the latter was a top sword master who had beaten Xiao Chuha before. On the ranking, besides the old monster sword artist who was ranked 2nd, Lu Xiaoyu would be the leader. Soon, the 4th day had passed. On the morning of the 5th day, today was the day of the battle. The sun had not completely risen yet, but the air-slicing noises from all directions suddenly became more intense. Most of the people who had arrived were the ones who were a bit further away from the 9-dragon mountain, or those who were a bit slower. Among them were some of the most eye-catching people, such as the head of the top 3 blade artists, Xie Baiting, and a white-haired elder right next to him, along with other master-level warriors. The white-haired elder who had come with Xie Baiting was not some random warrior, but an old monster sword artist who was ranked 2nd in the ranking. He was called Su Yuan from the Earth Sword Master, and he was at least 150 years old. One was a blade artist ranked 5th, while the other was a sword artist ranked 2nd. The arrival of the two would definitely attract a lot of attention. Brother Xia, since you are praising this battle so much, I am starting to get excited. I want to watch it. Su Yuan chuckled. Xia Baiting said, Brother Su, you will not be disappointed. Alright, since Brother Xia has said so, then I will definitely not be disappointed. Su Yuan was very clear about Xia Baiting's eyesight. He did not come a year ago, because with his status, there was no need for him to come. But this time, it was because Xia Baiting had told him that the battle between Lu Xiaoyu and Xiao Chuha would be at the same level as the battle between them. There would not be too much of a gap between them anymore. As for the battle between Yi Chun and Du Guju, to be honest, they did not care too much about it. Even the top martial geniuses needed time to grow. Therefore, this battle would be centered around Lu Xiaoyu and Xiao Chuha, while Yi Chun and Du Guju would just be the side dishes. Many people recognized the identity of Su Yuan from the Earth Sword sect, and all of them secretly rejoiced. Su Yuan from the Earth Sword sect had not appeared in front of the public for many years, and he was truly an old monster. It was said that his sword skills had long reached an unimaginable level. Of course, Xia Baiting's status was not any weaker than Su Yuan from the Earth Sword Martial School. Although his ranking was lower than Su Yuan's, the master-level warrior ranking was only for reference, and it had a certain degree of accuracy. If they were to really fight, it would be hard to tell who would be the stronger one. The reason why Su Yuan from the Earth Sword Martial School had stolen his thunder was because Xia Baiting had appeared in front of the crowd more times than Su Yuan. So people had gotten used to it. The morning fog had disappeared completely, and the sun had risen to 1/3 of the sky. People with good eyesight could see that there was a beam of white light flashing in the horizon. Each time it flashed, the distance between them would decrease a lot, as if it was teleporting. Soon, the white light turned into a human figure. It was Lu Xiaoyu. Lu Xiaoyu is finally here. I can't wait. Since Lu Xiaoyu is here first, then his battle with Xiao Chuha will definitely happen first. Actually, I want to see the battle between Yi Chun and Du Guju first. Otherwise, once Lu Xiaoyu and Xiao Chuha's battle is over, my interest would definitely decrease by half. It was like when one was used to eating good food, and suddenly eating something inferior. It would definitely be boring. But eating the inferior food first, and then eating the better food would definitely make the enjoyment longer. Lu Xiaoyu was like a white light dragon, as he arrived above the 9-dragon lake within a second. That sharp aura seemed to have cooled down the whole place. What a sword artist! Su Yuan's eyes brightened. At his level, he only needed to sense the other's aura to know his cultivation level. Without a doubt, Lu Xiaoyu had piqued his interest. Lu Xiaoyu. Xiao Chuha stood up, his blade intent aura clashing with Lu Xiaoyu's sword intent aura. The sky above the 9-dragon lake seemed to have changed as countless blade lights and sword shadows appeared. Some of the weaker people suddenly felt a chill all over their bodies. Goosebumps appeared all over their bodies, and their hair stood on end. This included Li Daoxian and Yan Qihua. One of them was a swordsman, and the other a bladesman, so they felt it more deeply than the others. It seems like the two of us will have to battle first. Oh well, let's get it over with, and leave as soon as possible. Lu Xiaoyu did not have much interest in watching the battle between Yi Chun and Du Guju, especially when he was waiting. That is exactly what I was thinking. The other battles are just secondary to me. Xiao Chuha's wounds had already recovered. As long as it was not a serious injury, it would not be a problem for him to recover in one night. Let's fight. Lu Xiaoyu's breathing was steady as his eyes started to sharpen. Stretching his body, Xiao Chuha was about to fly out when he suddenly made a noise. He looked into the distance and saw a beam of gray light. It is Du Guju. Du Guju is finally here. Someone yelled out. The gray light flew over at an extremely shocking speed. When it was close to the 9-dragon lake, it let go of its protective Zhenyuan layer and flashed once before appearing in the middle of the lake. Without looking at the others, Du Guju, whose eyes had turned gray, found Yi Chun and looked at him. Sitting on top of the mountain, Yi Chun put away the defensive sword spell manual and lifted his eyes, looking over with an amorous expression. When he sensed her aura, he was a bit surprised and started to think. Who? All of a sudden, a horrifying chi burst out of Duguju's body. That despairing blade intent pressed down on Yi Chun, who was on the mountain. Under that horrifying blade intent, the people who were standing close to it felt like they had arrived at hell. That despairing emotion started to grow on their faces. Such a horrifying blade intent. Yi Chun did not move, but Xie Baiting did. He released his own blade intent, which clashed with Duguju's despairing blade intent. What shocked Xie Baiting the most was that the second his blade intent touched Duguju's blade intent, he felt like there was a surreal Duguju attacking him with his blade. That despairing blade light filled the air, reflecting in his eyes and making his breathing speed up. Horrifying. Horrifying. Yi Chun will lose for sure. Xie Baiting's body shook as he let go of his blade intent. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Chapter 652. Although the others did not feel it as deeply as Xie Baiting did, they could all see the change in Duguju. Right then Duguju gave people the feeling of a killer from hell. As he walked, that despairing chi covered the whole world, and that horrifying blade intent could even scare ghosts and gods. Interesting. Xiao Chuha's long blade bounced up and down as an interested expression appeared on his face. Duguju's power was indeed out of his expectation. But of course, it was only out of his expectation. As a master-level blade artist, blade intent alone would not be enough to make him change his expression. Let's see your battle with Yi Chun first. I hope Yi Chun can last a couple of attacks. As his body relaxed, Xiao Chuha knew that his battle with Lu Xiaoyu would have to be delayed. Lu Xiaoyu looked at Duguju with a bit of surprise as he thought to himself. With only blade intent, Duguju is already at the forefront. I wonder how powerful he really is. With a powerful blade intent, one's own power would not be weak. But it could not be the only thing to measure one's power. The power was all about the warrior's overall performance. Besides the most important things like cultivation, willpower, profound sense, and other things that could be improved through training, it would also require battle experience and talent. Shoo! A white light flashed once as Lu Xiaoyu flew to the lakeside. Facing such a negative blade intent, Yi Chun did not change his expression as he said, Duguju, if you want to use your blade intent to threaten me, I am afraid you will be very disappointed. Indeed, Duguju put away his despairing blade intent. Among all of the young martial geniuses on this true spirit continent, perhaps only Yi Chun was someone that he could not see through. He had already guessed this result, but no matter what, he had to give it a try. Only after trying would he be able to make a decision. How could there be such a horrifying blade intent? It almost made me lose control of my mind. Me too. All of the people who were watching the battle had pale faces as they looked at Duguju with fear. This guy is indeed a top martial genius. Once he reaches the life and death realm, he will be a very horrifying king warrior. Perhaps he will become the second evil king. Su Yuan praised. Xie Baiting said, if he can reach the life and death realm, he will not be any weaker than Evil King. I think he will walk on another path. Evil King had reached the life and death realm 50 years ago, and was also a famous martial genius. If it were not for Xian Ho, then he would be the #1 martial genius of this continent in 1,000 years. Yeah. Su Yuan nodded and continued to say, the little girl from the Dantai family is also known as a top martial genius. I wonder if this Yi Chun's title is true or not. Indeed, Yi Chun's speed of increasing his cultivation could be considered as a top martial genius. But it was still not as impressive as Duguju and Dantai Mingyue. The former two had been showing off their top martial geniuses since they were young, and had never disappointed anyone. Therefore, being a top martial genius was both an honor and a pressure. Su Yuan did not have high hopes for Yi Chun, since it was not easy to reach the level of a top martial genius. Maintaining it for a short period of time was nothing, but maintaining it for a long period of time would be truly horrifying. Duguju and Dantai Mingyue had already been through it. I am afraid that Yi Chun will lose. Duguju's change had shocked Xie Baiting. Originally, he was quite optimistic about Yi Chun, since Yi Chun was from a small South Ridra region, which was a very low starting point. Therefore it was even more valuable. However, Duguju was still able to explode with a huge amount of power, even though he was not as powerful as the others. This was what it meant to be a top martial genius. Top martial geniuses would always be able to do the impossible. Let's postpone our battle for a bit. Unexpectedly, Dugaju did not start the battle with Yi Chun right away. Meanwhile, Yi Chun acted like it was natural, as if he had already known about it. Turning around, Dugaju looked at Xiao Chuha. Xiao Chuha, you and I are both blade artists. Among the blade artists, there can only be one number one. Therefore, you will lose under my blade for sure. As he spoke, he then said to Yi Chun, Yi Chun, I will fight with you as the number one blade artist. I hope you will not disappoint me. The others had taken the top 5 young warriors as their targets, but Dugaju had taken Yi Chun as his lifetime rival. Only Yi Chun could threaten him. The others were only temporary. Once Dugaju said that, everyone was shocked. Was it arrogance or was it confidence in his power? Without a doubt, compared to Dugaju, even Bai Minghui was not as powerful. Before his battle with Xiao Chuha, although Bai Minghui sounded a bit arrogant, it still gave everyone the feeling that he was afraid of Xiao Chuha. But now that Dugaju had said it, it was as if he was even more powerful than Xiao Chuha. You are too arrogant. Xiao Chuha obviously did not expect that Dugaju would challenge him first. But it was not important. What was important was that the latter's tone had completely pissed him off. He was one of the top 5 young warriors, and he had been through hundreds of battles. It was the first time he had been treated as someone who could be easily killed. All right, I will wait for you. Yi Chun's reply was very normal, without any arrogance. But it still made a lot of people look at each other. Dugaju had said that Xiao Chuha would definitely lose under his blade, and Yi Chun had said that he would wait for Dugaju. Even an idiot could tell that Yi Chun was implying that after he beat Xiao Chuha, Yi Chun would wait for Dugaju to battle with him. Obviously, beating Xiao Chuha would not surprise Yi Chun at all. Xiao Chuha had already shown his horrifying power before. And if Dugaju could beat Xiao Chuha, then Yi Chun would definitely know how horrifying Dugaju was. Under such circumstances, he still dared to say that he would wait for him, which made a lot of people suspicious. Arrogant, Lu Xiaoyu said with a low voice. No one knew if he was talking about Dugaju or Yi Chun. Su Yuan from the Earth Sword Master frowned as he forced a smile and said to Xia Baiting, young people nowadays do not know how to be humble anymore. See, things will come to an end eventually. Xia Baiting touched the handle of his blade. Under the stares of a lot of people, Yi Chun lowered his head, looking very calm. Of course, he would not say those words out of arrogance. To be honest, if Dugaju could not beat Xiao Chuha, then he would not have the power to fight with him at all. Chin. Taking out his long blade, the tip of the blade pointed at Xiao Chuha as Dugaju yelled, let's fight! Shoo! Xiao Chuha's feet stomped on the ground, and like an exploding wave, he arrived above the 9-dragon lake within a second, right in front of Dugaju. Bai Minghui had said this to me before, but he had lost. I will still say the same thing. If you want to challenge us, you are still too early. Suppressing his anger, Xiao Chuha said with a low voice. Whether I am early or not, you will find out soon enough. All right then, I would like to see what kind of power you have. In the battle with Bai Minghui, Xiao Chuha had waited until the end of the battle to finish the battle. But right now, that horrifying aura of an army was coming out of Xiao Chuha's body, and his eyes started to turn red. A lot of people knew that Xiao Chuha had been pissed off, and he would use all of his power right from the start. Very good. Dugaju nodded satisfactorily. Lose. That long blade with a white light was taken out of its scabbard, as Xiao Chuha held the blade with both of his hands. He threw out an attack from the sky, and that white blade light increased by hundreds of times, looking like a sky blade. The surface of the lake could not handle that powerful blade pressure, and a straight line was formed. All of the lake water within that line was turned into mist. Dang! With a wave of his long blade, that incoming blade light was blown away while Dugaju himself did not move an inch. He said lightly, Xiao Chuha, since I have the confidence to beat you, then I naturally have my reasons. This blade attack is too weak. Bring out all of your power. Gasp. The sound of people gasping was heard one after another. Although that blade attack from Xiao Chuha was not a killing attack, It was extremely fast in that split second. Since that blade attack from Dugaju was not a killing attack as well, it was obvious that Dugaju had the upper hand in the first attack. Awa! Xiao Chuha yelled as his body carried that extremely sharp blade light as he shot out, throwing out 49 blade attacks toward Dugaju. Each blade attack contained a blade aura that could split the ocean. With his power as one of the top 5 young warriors, if it were someone else, they would have been scared before the battle had even started. Unfortunately, his opponent was Dugaju. Squinting his eyes slightly, the long blade in Dugaju's hand shot out a white-colored blade light. Within that blade light, the images of all living beings appeared on it. That despairing chi spread out everywhere. Different from before, this despairing chi did not only affect one's mental state, but also affected Dugaju's body. In that kind of despair, Dugaju's power became even more powerful. Some of them would lose their will to fight in that despair, and become like the walking dead. But some of them would explode with power that they had never seen before. Even if it was just a normal blade attack, it would have the power to kill everything in its path. With the despairing blade intent, Dugaju had been in closed-up training for half a year in the evil demon cave, so he had learned more about the power of despair. Not only did he need to make his enemies feel despair, he also needed to make himself feel the threat of despair. Only by being under the threat of despair all the time would he be able to perform his despairing blade intent to its limit. Dang! 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 Countless blade lights clashed together, and the battle between Dugaju and Xiao Chuha reached its climax. The battle between the two was extremely dangerous. One could only see the blade light flying everywhere, and the white light shining everywhere. It was impossible to see the two's figures clearly, as if they had already been merged by the blade light. Using the despairing blade intent as the path of the blade art, Yi Chen studied the battle and thought to himself. Everyone was walking on a different path. Some people would use the sword as a weapon, which was actually no different from a normal warrior, while some would use the sword art to learn the profound. There would be a small group of people who had the attributed sword intent, who would use it as their main path, such as the Double Sword King, the Iron Sword King, and even the Battle King. Most of their martial arts were created with the attributed sword intent as the core. For example, the Double Sword King had the Slaughter Sword intent. Although his martial arts were no different from the others, and contained the same profound, people would be able to sense the killing aura in his martial arts. They were created purely for killing, and contained their own characteristics. Since Yi Chen had inherited their attributed sword intent, he could not be more familiar with it. However, Yi Chen was different from all of them. He was walking on the pure sword art, and the so-called profound and sword intent were all for the sword in his hand. Of course, the sword in his hand did not refer to a specific sword, but rather his sword artist's heart. As long as the sword artist's heart did not die, he would not stop moving forward. He would use the sword in his hand to break through all the obstacles. He gradually realized that the sword intent was derived from the sword, or it could be said that it was derived from the heart of a swordsman. Without the sword, without the heart of a swordsman, it was impossible to derive the sword intent. The source of the sword intent was oneself, the sword. What he wanted to walk on was the pure sword principle, the upright sword principle, which would not change. Chapter 653. The power that came out of desperation was just way too powerful. Even though Xiao Chuha had already used all of his power, and was even slightly more powerful than before, he still could not get the upper hand at all. He was completely suppressed by Du Gujiue, and had to back out 3,000 meters, his blade art starting to get messed up. Damn! Xiao Chuha was furious. Both of his eyes were bloodshot as his whole body used the power of that long blade attack to jump back into the air, throwing out a blade attack at Dugaju in front of him. You have been covered by despair. There is nowhere to run. Dugaju looked cold as his gray pupils shone with an emotionless light. Xiao Chuha's figure was reflected in his eyes, almost drowned by the gray background. Dang! Lifting up his right arm, he threw out another blade attack. Xiao Chuha backed out hundreds of meters again, and the clothes on his body had been torn apart, revealing the defensive armor underneath. The despairing blade art is indeed powerful. Although Yi Chen had not chosen the path of developing his sword art, based on the attributed sword intent, he did not deny it either. There was an advantage to using the despairing blade intent as the path, which was that the initial growth would be extremely fast. His power would increase exponentially, and the higher his understanding of despair, the more power he would be able to explode. Plus, because of the despairing aura, all of the blade attacks created would have the despairing element, which would be extremely coordinated. It would be able to bring out all of the power within the despair. Meanwhile, Yi Chen's sword art was very inclusive. It was calm and peaceful, and its growth was neither fast nor slow. However, it was very stable and could be controlled 100%. Therefore, it was still too early to talk about which path would be better. But one thing was for sure. Yi Chen had not chosen the path of the Battle King or the Iron Sword King. As for the Dual Sword King, it was even more impossible, since he had chosen his own sword art. Dang! 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 Bright sparks exploded in the air like bright fireworks. Wherever Dugaju went, Xiao Chuha would back out. Right then, most of the people could tell that Xiao Chuha had been completely suppressed, and the chance of him turning the situation around would be very slim. Among the people watching the battle, one of them shook his head and sighed. It is not that Xiao Chuha is weak, it is that Dugaju is too powerful. Compared to 1 year ago, his power has increased by at least a couple of times, while Xiao Chuha's improvement is not more than 30%. Therefore, Xiao Chuha will lose for sure. The top 5 young warriors are finally going to change. Dugaju is indeed a top martial genius. Even Xiao Chuha would have to make way for him. When a veteran powerhouse meets a new monster, the new monster will always be stronger. Before coming here, no one would have thought that Dugaju would be able to beat Xiao Chuha and become the first one to make it to the top. They all thought that even if it was a top martial genius, it would still take time to grow, and they thought that within 1 or 2 years, it would still be the top 5 young warriors. Unfortunately, they had forgotten that the reason why the top martial geniuses were top martial geniuses was not something that could be predicted with common sense. Plus, when the top martial geniuses met their opponents, they would explode with even more power. And for Dugaju, Yi Chen was without a doubt his catalyst. Of course, there were still people who thought highly of Xiao Chuha. One of them said, "Don't forget that Xiao Chuha still has his ace attack, the ocean-splitting 3-blade attack. Even if Bai Minghui loses to that attack, Dugaju might not be able to handle it." Yeah, Xiao Chuha's ocean-splitting 3-blade attack might be able to beat Dugaju. People who supported Dugaju argued back. Don't you forget that Dugaju still has his despair blade. 1 year ago, he could not control it completely. What about now? Just wait and see. Boom! The surface of the 9-Dragon Lake had been shattered by the battle between the 2 top blade masters. Ocean-splitting 3-blade attack. Finally, Xiao Chuha performed his ace attack. His whole body stepped on the wave, looking down from above, as he threw out 3-blade attacks toward Dugaju. The 3 massive blade lights stacked on top of each other, bringing about a drastic change in the weather of the 9-Dragon Mountain. The wind started to howl, and the undercurrent started to rise. You have the right to make me perform my despair blade attack. The despairing chi on Dugaju's body suddenly increased by a couple of times as a cold wind spread out. Meanwhile, his hair had turned gray as well. In the depth of his left eye, a white flame was burning. Whoever was stared at by that I would feel like they had arrived at hell, where countless evil spirits appeared out of nowhere and attacked their souls. Shoo! The space in front of him started to blur, and Dugaju's body disappeared from where he was standing. Crack! The blade light that Xiao Chuha had thrown out shattered like a bubble. Soon, a ghost-like shadow appeared in front of Xiao Chuha and threw out a blade attack. Without any suspense, under Dugaju's despair blade attack, all Xiao Chuha had to face was despair. His protective Zhen Yuan was no tougher than a piece of tofu, and it had been sliced in half. The next second, that cold blade power traveled through his armor and into his body before coming out from his back. That invisible blade pressure had sunk a blade mark into the lake's surface behind him. Pooh! A huge amount of blood spurted out of Xiao Chuha's mouth, forming a blood column. He had wanted to dodge, but his body was not listening to him. It seemed like he did not want to lose to Dugaju, so he somehow managed to bring out a new power from his despair, wanting to throw out a blade attack at Dugaju, who was right in front of him. Unfortunately, Dugaju was even faster than him. Another blade attack landed on his body, blowing him into the lake and making him flip a couple of times. He had completely lost his fighting power and fighting spirit. Drawing power from despair. You will never be able to compete with me. If it were someone else, Xiao Chuha might have been able to turn the situation around. But unfortunately, it was Dugaju who would not be able to do that, because his understanding of despair was way beyond people's imagination. Therefore, Xiao Chuha's last move was just like a trapped beast trying to fight back. Xiao Chuha lost. Xiao Chuha really lost. It has been almost 5 years, right? After 5 years, a top young warrior has finally fallen. Although they had already thought that Xiao Chuha would lose, when the result came out, most of them were still shocked. Even someone as powerful as Xiao Chuha had lost to Dugaju's blade. It was not hard to imagine how powerful Dugaju was. Perhaps no one under 40 years old could beat Dugaju. Even Bai Wuxia might not be able to do it. So powerful. Bai Minghui dared to challenge Xiao Chuha, but he realized that he would rather challenge someone else than Dugaju. Drawing power from despair, and making his opponent fall into despair. Even if it were someone with the same power as Dugaju, 99% of the time, they would lose. Sick. Situ Hao was also very scared of Dugaju. Making his opponent lose the chance to turn the situation around would make one's scalp go numb. Brother Xie, how confident are you in battling him? Su Yuan from the Earth Sword Master suddenly asked Xie Baiting. Xie Baiting forced a smile and said, if it were another blade artist with the same power as him, then it would be 50-50. But against him, it would be 40-60 at most. 40 for me, 60 for him. It seems like there will not be much to see from now on. Su Yuan nodded. Chapter 654. Even Li Daoxian, Yin Qihua and Bing Ling, who came from the same place as Yi Chen, felt that Yi Chen did not have much of a chance. It was not that Yi Chen was weak, but that Dugaju was just too powerful. One blade, he had beaten Xiao Chuha, who was one of the top 5 young warriors, to the point that he could not even fight back. This kind of power had already surpassed the top 5 young warriors. Even if it were by Wuxia, he would not have much of a chance to win against him, not to mention Yi Chen. Bai Wuxia looked at Dugaju with a serious expression. He shook his head and did not say anything. Ting! Lu Xiaoyou's sword kept vibrating, letting out a clear sword hum. The second Dugaju beat Xiao Chuha. The sword hum reached its peak, almost flying out of its scabbard. Ah, we have all underestimated Dugaju. Who knew that he would grow to this level within a year? Right now, not to mention Yi Chen, no one under the age of 40 could beat him. Hai Weia looked at Yi Chen and sighed. Yan Fengfeng said, the final battle has not started yet. Perhaps there will be a chance. Let's hope so. Hai Weia moved his gaze away, and looked at Yi Chen. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen stood up. A heavy wind blew past, causing his blue robe to float in the air. His long black hair danced in the air like ink. Dugaju, you have the right to challenge me now. The first sentence that Yi Chen said after standing up had caused a huge commotion. Did I hear it right? Some people thought that they had heard it wrong. I have the right to challenge you. Dugaju squinted his eyes. He was different from the others. If it were someone else who said this, he would not care about it at all. But what Yi Chen said had given him a strong sense of danger. It was like a great sword was about to be pulled out of its scabbard. This is Yi Chen. Lu Xiaoyu frowned. Xiao Chuha had lost to Dugaju, so there was nothing for him to do today. He knew that he did not have that much confidence in fighting against Dugaju, which was undeniable. But he and Yi Chen were both sword artists, so what Yi Chen said was obviously way too arrogant. Yi Chen, today is the day of your duel with Dugaju. However, I would like to know what level your sword art has reached. Yi Chen nodded. Sure, let's decide the winner in 3 moves. Alright, let's limit it to 3 moves. Stretching his body, Lu Xiaoyu soared into the sky like a white dragon, flying towards Yi Chun at an extreme speed. Before he arrived, a sharp sword qi had already pierced through the air. Lu Xiaoyu and Yi Chun want to fight too. Many people were surprised. Sky Kill Sword Art. Lu Xiaoyu's sword art could only be described in 3 words: fast, brutal and accurate. And the most powerful attack would be his Sky Kill Sword Art. Once performed, the space seemed to have shrunk, just like Xiaohozuan and Yi Chen's void-shattering finger art, which could ignore the distance between them. However, the Sky Kill Sword Art did not contain the space profound, but the profound of wind. The wind was everywhere, and so was the Sky Kill Sword Art. Lu Xiaoyu waved out his sword, and all of the wind turned into sword qi, attacking toward Yi Chen. No wonder Xiao Chuha had lost to him before. Yi Chen's expression changed, not daring to take it lightly. Since the two were limited to 3 attacks, it was obvious that it was not a real battle of life and death. Therefore, losing one move was still a loss. Taking out his long sword, Yi Chen took a deep breath and took a step forward. Something strange happened. Yi Chen's soul seemed to have left his body as he walked out of his body. He threw out a sword attack toward that sword qi. Then, he changed his step art, and another Yi Chen walked out, waving his sword toward the sky as well. 3, 5, 7. Within that second, Yi Chen had taken 7 steps, turning into 7 Yi Chens. Although they were waving their swords in an orderly manner, it gave people the feeling that there were 7 Yi Chens waving swords at the same time. Pooh, pooh, pooh. The sword qi disappeared completely, and the space twisted a bit. Such a fast sword. Everyone watching the battle was shocked by Yi Chen's sword art. They could not help but open their eyes wide. Sky-slaying sword. Lu Xiaoyu's expression changed as the Zhen Yuan inside his body burst out and poured into his long sword. A sword artist's Zhen Yuan had always been pure. Not to mention that Lu Xiaoyu's cultivation base was already at the peak of late Sea of Souls realm. As a huge amount of Zhen Yuan poured in, the sharp long sword in his hand seemed to twist like a beam of twisted light. His hand grabbed onto the end of the light tightly as he stabbed toward Yi Chen. Pop! This sword stab seemed to have broken through some kind of barrier. The mountain peak where Yi Chen was at started to twist. At first glance, it seemed like there was a mirror there, and it could shatter at any moment. Being inside the mirror, Yi Chen would not be able to escape. Breaking the space is not that far away. Su Yuan knew how powerful this sword attack was. Normally, only Life and Death Realm warriors could break the space. But of course Life and Death Realm warriors were way too powerful. Even a normal punch would be able to shatter the space, not to mention Life and Death Realm warriors. Below Life and Death Realm, even the half-step king warriors would have the power to break the space. However, if they wanted to escape into the surreal space, it would still be a long way off. As for warriors below the half-step king warrior level, no one had ever heard of anyone being able to break the space. But this sword attack of Lu Xiaoyu was able to twist the space like a mirror. Thunder Devour. Silver lightning gathered at the tip of the sword. Yi Chen did not back out at all as he threw out a sword attack. A perfect thunder ball appeared out of nowhere. Boom! The space started to shake, and the sky suddenly turned bright blue. Under this intense light, Yi Chen and Lu Xiaoyu looked like 2 twisted shadows that could be torn apart at any second. Alright. I indeed did not expect that your power had already reached this level. I admit that I have underestimated you. Everyone in the world has underestimated you. Lu Xiaoyu had been shaken by that exploding thunder ball. He almost puked out a mouthful of blood. That sword attack of his had only touched the edge of breaking the space, and was still far away from actually breaking it. The space was not like a mirror, and it was not that fragile. Even though it looked like it was about to shatter, it could actually handle a couple times more power than before. So this step was extremely difficult. So powerful. Xiao Chuha's face was pale as a complicated look flashed through his eyes. While he was still immersed in the battle between the top 5 young warriors, Dugu Ju and Yi Chun had already caught up, and even surpassed him. It was a huge blow to him, and it had denied him everything. The third attack, let me do it. Yi Chun did not care about the explosion. His body shook once, and that vague shadow disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already right next to Lu Xiaoyu. Spiritual sword attack. 3 consecutive slashes. The spiritual sword attack was extremely fast, leaving only a flash of light. Ting! Ting! Shoo! Lu Xiaoyu's sword was indeed fast, blocking out Yi Chen's first 2 sword attacks. However, he could not handle the third one anymore. It was not because he was not fast enough, but because he could not grasp the timing. Without that, as long as his sword speed was not faster than Yi Chen's, he would lose. His right arm went cold, and Lu Xiaoyu was blown away, standing in the air quietly. That burning blue light had not disappeared yet. Yi Chen said lightly, 3 attacks have passed. Lu Xiaoyu looked at the sword mark on his right arm, his face full of shock. What? Su Yuan had not expected this at all. So he looked at Xie Baiting with shock. The two exchanged a look, not knowing what to say. Xie Baiting opened his mouth a couple of times as if he wanted to say something, and then closed it again. In the end he said, I am getting old. My eyes are getting worse. I could not even see through a young man's power. Su Yuan said bitterly, it is not that we are getting worse. It is just that this young man is way too talented. He has been keeping a low profile, and no one knows how powerful he is. First, Dugaju had beaten Xiao Chuha, and then Yi Chen, who was not expected to win, had beaten Lu Xiaoyu. 2 of the top 5 young warriors had fallen one after another. The former was still okay, since everyone had already recognized him from the beginning. But the latter was basically not expected. They only thought that after Dugaju had beaten Xiao Chuha, there would be nothing to see anymore. In their minds, no matter how powerful Yi Chen was, he would not be as powerful as the top 5 young warriors. Reality told them, Dugaju was a monster. Yi Chen was also a monster. Within 1 year, Dugaju's power could increase by a couple of times, and so could Yi Chen. There was nothing that he could not do. No wonder he said that Dugaju has the right to challenge him. Someone suddenly realized. It is still hard to say right now. We will have to see how the battle between him and Dugaju turns out. But it is a bit more interesting now. Luckily I did not leave. Monster against monster. This is the top battle. After beating Lu Xiaoyu with 3 attacks, no one dared to underestimate Yi Chen anymore. They all calmly waited for the battle between Dugaju and Yi Chen. If one had to ask who was the most emotional, it would naturally be Li Daoxian and the other 2. They felt like they were in a dream, their mouths slightly open. Yi Chen's brilliance was too dazzling, so much so that they felt like they did not know Yi Chen at all. The Yi Chen of the past was no longer the Yi Chen in front of them, and the Yi Chen in front of them was the real Yi Chen. I didn't misjudge you. You are my real opponent. Dugaju was slightly different, but he soon revealed an excited expression. What top 5 young warriors? What Blade Dao Master? None of that mattered. He had already surpassed those that he should have surpassed, and the one that he had yet to surpass was still Yi Chen. Let's fight. After warming up, Yi Chen's blood started to boil. A destructive sword intent exploded, and the sky suddenly turned dark. It was as if they had arrived in a dark starry sky. There were signs of destruction everywhere. If one's mind was weak, they would not even have the courage to pick up their weapons and fight. Dugaju's blade intent made people feel despair. But Yi Chen's sword intent was suppressing Dugaju's blade intent, not giving it any chance to fight back. The place where Yi Chen was at was like a sword domain. Thousands of sword intents pointed to hell. Although despair can't do anything to you, it can give me power. Dugaju knew that he would not be able to do anything to Yi Chen in terms of willpower. So he could only let himself be in despair and absorb power. His body flashed once as Dugaju held his blade with both of his hands. His blade intent was pushed to its limit, and he threw out a blade attack at Yi Chen with extreme power. Xiao Chuha realized bitterly that this blade attack from Dugaju was even more powerful than when he was battling with him. It was obvious that he had not used all of his power yet. Chapter 655. Dang! Dazzling sparks burst forth, lighting up the sky. In the blink of an eye, Yi Chen swung his sword at the weak point of the long saber, bouncing Dugaju away, causing his opponent's follow-up attack to end in vain. The moment Dugaju was bounced away, he immediately knew that the situation was not good. He did not expect Yi Chen's observation and accuracy to have reached the acme of perfection. His saber was extremely fast, but his opponent was still able to find the weak point of his long saber and hit it in one strike. It was as if he was the one who sent himself to the saber. The long saber danced impenetrable. For the first time, Du Guju switched from offense to defense. The next moment, thousands of sparks burst forth from Du Guju's body. Yi Chen's sword was like the most terrifying venomous snake. Once it found an opportunity, it would launch a fatal attack, not giving his opponent the slightest chance. When the spectators saw that Du Guju was suppressed right from the start, they felt a little breathless. Without exchanging blows with Yi Chen, there was no way they would know how powerful he was. At first, Du Guju thought that his saber speed was fast enough, and his saber force was strong enough to compete with Yi Chen. He might even be able to suppress his opponent. But now, he knew that he was wrong. Not only was his opponent's sword speed and sword force not inferior to his, the scariest thing was that even though both of their speed and strength were similar, he was the one who was forced to retreat. He had a feeling of not being able to unleash his full strength. One of them changed from offense to defense, while the other changed from counterattack to all-out attack. The process could only be described as a flash of lightning. The spectators could only see the proof of their exchange from the sparks. Otherwise, they would have thought that the two of them did not even touch each other. Ding 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 ding. Du Guju's defense was flawless. Even Yi Chen was unable to break through it. However, Yi Chen could weaken his defense. Every strike landed on the weak point of his saber. Although there were too many strikes, it was not very accurate. But out of 10 strikes, he would succeed at least 5 to 6 times. Like spinning silk from a cocoon, Du Guju's saber-light defense became thinner and thinner. He was very clear that under Yi Chen's fierce attacks, his saber speed was starting to slow down. If this continued, when his saber speed slowed down by half a beat, his defense would be broken. All of a sudden, that despairing chi on Du Guju's body increased again. A white flame burned in the depth of his left eye, and his hair turned gray as well. That thinner saber-light defense started to increase at a visible speed, steadily blocking out Yi Chen's incoming attack. Not only that, once his saber-light defense reached a new level, Du Guju shook his wrist, and that saber-light defense disappeared completely. It turned into a bright saber-light attacking toward Yi Chen. It was indeed the despairing saber attack, a different kind of despairing saber attack. Yi Chen had been through hundreds of battles, and he had never failed in terms of technique. This time it was the same. He held his sword with both of his hands, attacking on that saber light. That golden pattern spread out in all directions. Boom! Yi Chen had only backed out dozens of steps, and his body's center of gravity had not changed at all. Just this alone showed that he was a couple of times more powerful than Xiao Chuha. If Du Guju's saber power was extremely powerful, then Yi Chen's sword art would be unpredictable. This was everyone's first impression, since that blade attack was way too sudden and horrifying. However, even in that kind of situation, Yi Chen was still able to block it out. After getting the upper hand with that blade attack, Du Guju did not stop attacking. He threw out dozens of blade attacks toward Yi Chen, and each one of them looked like a white rainbow. Blocking out one blade attack was not that scary, but to block out dozens of them would be almost impossible. Even Xiao Chuha could not block out the real despairing saber attack. And right now, it only had about 1/3 of its power. After hundreds of blade attacks, normal defense would not be able to handle it at all. What a powerful power! Yi Chen could sense that Du Guju's blade speed and power had reached a whole new level, and its attacking power had increased drastically. Each blade attack was just like a normal ace attack. If he wanted to defend against it, he would have to use his ace attacks, which would be the only way out. Hoo! The long sword was waved in the air. With Yi Chen as the starting point, circles of golden pattern spread out, blocking out the incoming white blade light one after another. What? Consecutive ace attacks? Du Guju was shocked, and his blade attack could not help but pause for a second. Although his despairing blade attack was an ace attack, it was different from normal ace attacks. It was based on his own body, and there was nothing special about the blade attack. Therefore, it could be performed continuously. Of course, performing it too fast would weaken the blade power. But it did not matter. Even if it only had 1/3 of its power, with enough of it, it would still be more powerful than 100% despairing blade attack. However, Yi Chen's ace attacks had cancelled out this attack completely. Thunder Devour. The sword momentum changed. Yi Chen's figure rushed forward, and he waved his sword to release a perfect thunder ball. The thunder ball triggered a circle of space ripples, and instantly appeared in front of Du Guju. Break! Du Guju's eyes were burning with a white flame, and he slashed the thunder ball with his blade. Only when the Thunder Devour was in a perfect state could it burst out with the greatest destructive power. After being slashed in half, it could not even exert 1/10 of its power. Du Guju's blade attack could be said to have displayed the blade's speed and power to the fullest. Otherwise, if he was just a little bit slower, the thunder ball would have exploded in an instant. These two are actually strong to such a degree. There were at least 20 or 30 experts who came to watch the battle. They sadly found that since the beginning of the battle, the strength that Du Guju and Yi Chen had displayed was enough to kill them in a second. Just a random blade light and sword shadow could cut them in half. An unprecedented battle between the young generation. Elder Gao Changtian of the Pavilion Master had come as well. The development of Du Guju and Yi Chen was beyond his expectation. These two were 28 years old, and the other was 26 years old. Their ages were almost the same, but their power had surpassed that of the young generation. Peerless Proud Pair. Someone blurted out the name without thinking. Peerless Proud Pair, this is a good description. The people next to him pondered for a while, and they felt that it was a good description for Du Guju and Yi Chen. Just like that, the Peerless Proud Pair had become a unique term for Du Guju and Yi Chen. As for Dantai Mingyue, although she was also known as a monster, she was a woman after all, and it was a bit awkward for her to be called a Peerless Proud Pair with a man. Besides, not many people knew about Dantai Mingyue's real power. 3 consecutive cuts. Yi Chen activated his sword steps. His body turned into a beam of sword light, moving around without a fixed direction. The long sword in his hand was either cutting, stabbing, or cutting, aiming right at Du Guju's weak spot. Du Guju was most afraid of close combat with Yi Chen, since it required a lot of skills. His skills were already scary enough, but Yi Chen was even better. Before Lu Xiaoyu, who had a great sword art, had been defeated by Yi Chen's spiritual sword 3 consecutive cuts. The strong sense of danger had pushed Du Guju's reflexes to the limit. He blocked out Yi Chen's last cut, but that sharp sword chi had still taken away a piece of his sleeve. Despairing Fox. Taking 3 steps back, Du Guju's long gray hair danced in the air. He threw out a demonic fox phantom in the air. The demonic fox looked ferocious with its sharp teeth all over its body. It opened its mouth and tried to swallow Yi Chen. Explode. A thunderball was thrown into the demonic fox phantom's mouth. Boom. The demonic fox phantom exploded into pieces, and the electric shock waves spread out in all directions. Alright, that's enough. Yi Chen suddenly increased his speed. He used his dragon power on his arm, and poured his Zhen Yuan into his longsword. He then threw out an extremely fast sword attack at Du Guju. This sword attack was so fast that it looked like an illusion. So fast. Am I going to lose? Du Guju was suddenly filled with despair. However, it was different from before. This despair was brought to him by Yi Chen, and not by himself. It had to be said that Yi Chen had still underestimated the power of despair. Despair could make one's potential burst out instantly. Du Guju felt like he was back in the evil demon cave again. Dang! At that critical moment, Du Guju saw the sword's trajectory, and threw out his blade to meet it. A huge spark spread out in a sphere, and a huge fireball appeared between the two. Ichem? You can even block it like this? Close combat was Yi Chen's strongest power. He could not only use his extraordinary skills, but also have the dragon power. In other words, unless Du Guju's defense was like Xia Hozuan's, who had swallowed a Blood Emperor battle spirit pellet, he would not be able to block out this sword attack at all. But Du Guju was not Xia Hozuan after all. The despair had increased his five senses to a whole new level, allowing him to see the sword's trajectory. The power of despair has its limit. Yi Chen's hands were covered by a layer of white dragon bone defense as he held onto his sword tightly. He threw out one sword attack after another at Du Guju. Each time he threw out a sword attack, the space would twist a little. The whole space was like a mirror, reflecting the two's figures. Du Guju's physical power was not low either, which was about 300,000 pounds. Half of it was his own power, and the other half was from training some of the spirit plants that could increase his power. After all, it was not just the dragon blood plant that could increase chi power. It was just that the dragon blood plant had the best effect. Dang! 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 Balls of fireballs exploded as Du Guju backed out, while Yi Chen continued to attack. Finally, both of Du Guju's arms went numb, and he was stabbed in the shoulder by Yi Chen. That sharp sword power traveled through the defense armor and landed on the inside of Du Guju's shoulder. Boom! Du Guju puked out a huge amount of blood as his body was blown backward. Because of the extreme speed, circles of pattern appeared in front of him. Du Guju has lost. Just how powerful is this Yi Chen? This is unbelievable. Even Du Guju could not stop Yi Chen. We have all made a wrong estimation. Monstrous, monstrous. Du Guju is monstrous enough, but Yi Chen is even more monstrous. Everyone felt that Du Guju was strong enough, so strong that it was terrifying. However, such a strong Du Guju still couldn't stop Yi Chen. This caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Yi Chen, who had fully displayed his strength, made everyone feel what it meant to be unstoppable for the first time. Despair. At this moment, Du Guju, who was flying backwards, suddenly shouted. He used all the strength in his body, as well as the hidden potential in the depths of his heart, and slashed out with his blade. When this blade slashed out, the boundless and terrifying blade light instantly shattered, turning into a gray light pillar with a diameter of several hundred meters, sweeping towards Yi Chen. Within the gray light pillar, one could vaguely see the shadows of countless people, and the cries of ghosts and gods could be heard. You can't block this blade. After the blade slashed out, Du Guju didn't even have the strength to control his body. The eerie white flames in his eyes also dissipated into nothingness. In his sight, the gray light column was about to devour Yi Chen at a lightning-fast speed. Dodging it was already impossible. The spectators clearly didn't expect that Du Guju would have an even more terrifying killing move. All of their mouths were wide open. The so-called instant reversal was nothing more than this. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.